So in this session, I'd love to discuss how workplace learning might benefit from using microlearning approach. And according to our breakout room, I got some interest in that field too. And also I'll provide, or at least I'll try to provide you with some strategies on how you can embrace the approach and actually start using it. So the first slide is kind of my favorite one because on this slide you can see lots of great words. Oh, just one comment. If something goes wrong, please let me know in the chat. I'll try to keep my eye on that. So probably I can even respond to some questions as they appear. So feel free to ask me straightforwardly. So microlearning bingo, all these nice words you are highly likely to meet when you open some microlearning articles or you visit some conferences on microlearning. And I intentionally decided to start with highlighting that because all of these wonderful words actually are often misused and in most cases have no basis. For example, short, that's, I'd say, the word that is super widely used, and you will encounter this word most often. But in the real life, it's very difficult to measure what's the definition of short actually is, right? Is 10 minutes a long time? And what about 9 minutes then, or 8 minutes, right? So in fact, microlearning is not limited to some particular length, actually. It depends heavily on what the use case is and what you try to achieve with your microlearning asset, on who your learner is, right? So time is definitely not the right criterion for you to consider whether this asset can be described as microlearning or not. And frankly, if your asset, if some piece of content lasts 5 minutes, but it's not relevant to your learning objective or to your organizational needs, it's a waste of 5 minutes. So just keep that in mind. Or stickiness, also brilliant word, but microlearning doesn't automatically becomes sticky. And to my opinion, actually, stickiness is primarily affected by what we call relevance. So I mean, when the content is relevant to your learner, it's relevant to the context your learner is, then you might end up with something sticky. And I don't know, just retention, also not a magic bullet by all itself, because just creating some short pieces of content doesn't mean that you can influence the retention. While some spaced microlearning assets you deliver over some period of times definitely can help you to retain knowledge better. I don't know what to make comment here on. Probably you can help me out if you are interested in some specific terms. I'd comment on consuming on the go, because that's also a very tricky stuff here. Basically, it makes sense, right? Especially when we speak about some frontline stuff that address some current situations and has to learn using their mobile, using their smartphones, right between interactions with their customers. Or think of seasonal workers, right? But when speaking about consuming on the go, I know that many vendors and many learning leaders actually kind of substitute this, saying that learners will be able to consume content outside their work, in their actually private lives. But this is a common fallacy. Just providing some content, bite-sized, even highly engaging, doesn't mean that your learners will replace all the family matters, all their friends and hobbies just to spend their time on learning something, right? Or technology, also great example. Microlearning doesn't mean that you should use some technology or software or I don't know, something something digital. I can create a banner and I can put it on the wall, and it might be very short and targeted to the situation so that the learner can benefit from it, and that will be still microlearning. So let's talk about the definition of microlearning. And there are lots of them on the internet, but I landed on this particular one. I took it from the book Microlearning Short and Sweet, designed by Carol Kopp and Robin DeFelice. If you'd like to dive deeper, I will share the links with you. First of all, the book is great, and the definition is also great. And what I love about it is that it consists of some very crucial elements of what microlearning piece should be built upon, actually. An instructional unit that provides short engagement in an activity that is intentionally designed to elicit a specific outcome from the participant. So we have some short engagement that is intentionally designed. You can't simply cut your existing 1 hour long course into dozens of pieces and call it microlearning, because all the learning outcomes will be still in place, while a true piece of microlearning actually responds to one learning objective. And just keep in mind that your microlearning asset should definitely elicit a specific outcome. Just sharing a knowledge, some good to know information doesn't make sense. But when you tell once how to perform better, how to do some particular task, how to launch new software on your new laptop, it's all about microlearning then. As we discussed with Sami, my presentation in advance, she encouraged me to talk about microlearning benefits, and I enthusiastically took her advice because, there are lots of kind of advantages you can stumble upon while searching about microlearning. But definitely, again, to my point, it all should boil down to the L&D departments, to companies that are trying to benefit from it. First of all, your learners were not hired, if we talk about some corporate field, they were not hired to learn something. They were hired to deliver their operational duties. So with any learning asset, whether it is microlearning or whether it is macrolearning, you should think of how to help them perform better. That's actually why we are in the L&D field. The same actually for the students. They are not just learning for the sake of learning. It doesn't make sense. So as for microlearning benefits, when you apply this approach reasonably, I mean, it fits the existing training strategy. I mean, when you are not just follow it as a trend and try to convert all existing content into micro pieces. It doesn't work that way. When you carefully select what you need to introduce via some short bites, what content can be actually introduced via short bites, because you can't teach some engineering stuff through millions of micro pieces, right? So when you design carefully, keeping all the microlearning design principles in mind, microlearning gives you a brilliant opportunity and ability to flex and adapt. And what I'm talking about here, just imagine you have some content to deliver on Monday, and you have some piece of content to deliver on Wednesday and then on Friday, and you can plan ahead. And then you can go and say, like, you know what? It seems like Monday's experiment showed us that the content we intended to deliver on Wednesday won't work out. So we need to modify that, to improve that. And thus you can always be in the process of improvement, trying to nail your content to your learners' needs. With micro pieces, it's much easier to adapt them. And I believe that microlearning helps you to transfer knowledge to a job faster. Of course, we need to keep in mind that microlearning as macrolearning, to provide this transfer of learning, should should be kind of spiced with such elements as practice, reflection, feedback, metrics, right? So if you use microlearning as part of your strategy, using all the right elements of learning, as I mentioned above, and you can adapt as you go, so your chances to faster transfer learning are really high. And one more comment here, I personally put it in italics intentionally because it highly depends on your tool set, and it depends on the readiness of your organization to start using microlearning and the attitude of your stakeholders. Sometimes you will just spend lots of efforts and time on communication, but generally microlearning will help you to cut down on some L&D costs and time. So another debatable question about the microlearning field is how long is a piece of microlearning? And I'd love you to comment in the chat. Just put A, B, C, or D. What are your thoughts on that? How long a true piece of microlearning should be? D. The first answer appear C. D. I encourage you to be more active. Thank you so much for everyone who voted. And the good news here is, despite the correct answer highlighted as D, everyone here is right, because technically all the answers were like less than 10 minutes. And here I'm not an advocate of just strict timing, like, oh, you should create something that lasts only for 3 minutes. Not so. Based on my experience, the length of great microlearning piece should be just enough for learners to get some knowledge, then to get back to their work immediately, already equipped with some new knowledge or skills, or as the situation requires, right? When we speak about microlearning, in most cases, we speak about just-in-time learning, when your learner deals with some problem, with some struggle, and they need answer. So they won't have time just to dive into some games or high interactivity, as the industry is currently being kind of really excited about. Sometimes all your learner or student or your employee needs is just the instruction, 3 steps of do this and that, and do not do this, right? So just keep in mind that the shorter, the better, and far more likely to be read and understood here. And always think about the relevance. It should come first. Another thing I want to discuss with you is that designing microlearning must be intentional. And frankly, I often get the question like, what's the common mistake everyone is doing in the field when trying to launch microlearning programs? And my response is that when you try to kind of cut your existing 1-hour-long course into lots of pieces, because as I've mentioned it previously, all the learning objectives are still in place, when your true piece of microlearning should respond only to one learning objective. So what I'm leading here, just try to design intentionally. If you have already great, well-designed learning asset, you may enhance it with some warm-up that you delivered previously, like to set expectations, to warm up your students, your learners, or you can deliver something afterwards as a follow-up to help them, just technically to remind them to start using some new skills, right? According to the forgetting curve theory, learners will forget almost everything just in a couple of days after your training session. So reminding them about what you delivered is crucial for knowledge retention. The other thing I want to discuss with you is what's better, microlearning or macrolearning? Actually, this question always comes up during conversation with clients and on some conferences related to microlearning. And, microlearning can't replace macrolearning. Just, it's not possible. And definitely there are some skills that can be trained using kind of a standalone modules. And as we've also discussed it previously, think of frontline staff or seasonal workers. They all fulfill very simple job duties constantly over time. So you might succeed actually when you deliver just a bunch of cool modules on how to kind of greet your customer, how to handle some customer objections when you are a waiter, and so on. As for this particular picture, I wanted to highlight that just comparing what's better, microlearning or macrolearning, reminds me of comparing what's better, tomato or cheese. Because that question comes up, better for what? If I'm making a tomato soup, then probably I'll need some tomatoes, right? Cheese might be a good addition, but it doesn't make sense to make tomato soup only with the cheese, right? So in microlearning might be not the way to teach somebody the, let's say, history of French literature. But at the same time, using microlearning, you can deliver some nice phrases, some words, some conventional conversational French that a tourist or probably some manager can use when being in Paris during their work meetings. That will be very helpful for them. And again, it's not stating like the history of French literature is something more important than just some useful phrases in French. Because if you are a tourist in Paris and you was injured and you desperately need ambulance, then just being an expert in French literature won't help you. And having some piece of content with useful phrases that will allow you to call on ambulance and get help will be a way out, right? So let's proceed. Here I suggest playing a very quick game and consider whether my option that I will suggest to you is microlearning or whether not. So let's start. The first one is a learning asset that you use to balance knowledge levels among the participants, and you deliver it before an event. Please put in the chat yes if you think that it is microlearning, and put in the chat no if you don't think so. No. Okay. Any more ideas? Sammy, you should also join the chat. You're a participant.
For me, it's because I don't want it to be shown in the recording just in case. That's why I'm not opening it, but I also know the answers, right?
So the answer here is actually yes. Because of course it depends on the content you will put into that asset. If you just try to squeeze in everything and prepare with everything, I don't know, that you delivered throughout the year, of course that won't be microlearning. But when you use this asset to deliver some basic terms in order to just kind of help your learners be more confident when you will be talking about them during an event. Or you can set expectations, or you can even deliver some agenda. That will be very helpful. So my advice here, you can just start using microlearning as in the form of warm-ups and make thus the upcoming training or any event more meaningful and set some expectations among your learners. So the next question Oh yeah, Jennifer, you're absolutely right. Depends on how much knowledge I haven't noticed your comment in the chat. So next question, a series of mini courses that resulted from cutting one long course. Microlearning or not? No. So actually it's pretty easy because we've discussed it previously, but I wanted to reinforce that moment. And of course, that's not microlearning because one outcome per activity. So probably the last question here, sum up that follows a webinar. For example, just mention if I sent you some follow-up of this session with some highlights, with some links to useful resources, with my contact, I don't know, and you can turn to it anytime and just recall what we discussed here. Is it microlearning or not? Well, actually, it also depends on the content you will put into that summary. But in most cases, it will be microlearning when you try to recall about what you delivered, when you just put it like, okay, you need to use microlearning. Step 1, step 2, step 3. If you need some more comments and explanations, just open this link. If you need to ask your question, just reach out to Kate. Here's her LinkedIn. That will be actually microlearning. You will be convinced and reminded to use what we discussed here. And the last thing, we also touched this topic, a poster around the wall that tells you how to wash your hands. Microlearning or not? Microlearning, of course, microlearning. As long as your poster tells someone how to do a particular task and explains it very quickly and vividly. So yeah, it's microlearning. It doesn't mean that you need to use any kind of a mobile app or, I don't know, video just to deliver that skill. If there is a tab, there is a person and her hands. So just summing up, uses of microlearning, mainly based on my experience with 7 tabs, because I talk to our clients on a regular basis and I know exactly how companies benefit from microlearning. So the first scenario is to reinforce an event, deliver some warm-ups, some follow-ups and reminders. If your training session consists of some modules you deliver over a period of time, you can also deliver some prompts in betweens, just in order to kind of warm up and prepare to the second session. Then introduce a skill. And here I speak about some very, very simple skills like how to handle one particular customer objection or how to cook soup. I'm not trying to just to create a book on everything. I'm dealing with one particular objective. Support a job task. What our clients use 7 tabs for: safety instructions, job aids, some how-to guides, do's and don'ts, for example, like the list of steps you should take to kind of apply for maternity leave or to launch some software. It's also microlearning. And the main thing here I'd love to highlight is when you are delivering such job performance content, just make sure you deliver them right in the moment person might need them. When you understand that here's the point, your learner, your employee, or your student might need some extra information, just put the link right where they might stumble upon it, or direct it to that link quickly. That might be a link, that might be video, infographics, or audio. Today we're really spoiled for choice, and you can just think of something that will resonate with you personally, with your learners, with the resources actually you have at hand. And the last kind of a use case here is to prototype e-learning. Frankly, I'm a fan of just cutting every project into some steps, and I always encourage everyone to start small. It works great in the L&D field because you have lots of stakeholders, you have subject matter experts you should consult. and you have your learners, some group of people you need to get feedback from. So start small with some microlearning assets before creating some longer conventional e-learning material. And you will just move step by step and see how you can improve that, how you can adjust. That's very helpful. And right now on the screen, you can see the QR code. You can take your smartphones and scan this QR code. You'll open a microlearning piece on uses of microlearning. I put together all these 4 use cases, explained the meaning of them, and put some examples so that you can familiarize yourself with how you can put this knowledge in practice. This link requires no app, no password. You can just open it right now and save it to get back to it later after the presentation. And the next thing here, I'm just thinking that right now you have the same feelings about like thinking about going to micro is something very exciting, and that's what I see when I talk to clients, and they are all like, oh, this is a cool stuff, microlearning is the future of learning. But when they start learning something and they start designing programs, and they see that actually it's not like a snap and you have all the content created and everything works great, and everyone is super excited about your microlearning programs. But good news, I will provide you with a plan of how you could start at least 5 simple steps I took from Carla Torgerson book. The book is Designing Microlearning. And if you just have any interest in microlearning, that's the super handy advice. You will have all the kind of guides how to, that's I can't say that it's microlearning about microlearning, because the book actually is pretty large, but at the same time all the chapters are super useful. They are standalone, and you can just keep this book and follow their advice, and I suppose that you will have no problems with implementing this nice approach. But just speaking generally, start with identifying your objectives. I guess that's the core issue here. You should understand clearly why you are designing this particular asset, or how your whole microlearning program will look like, what you're trying to achieve with it. Then you should determine formats and technology, because sometimes thinking just like, oh, videos are super popular, I should create some videos, doesn't make much sense. Just an example from my experience, a company created a bunch of really nice videos. They invested a lot into filming about presenting some new product features. The target audience was sales representatives. And it might sound okay, but in fact, it was not so, because those people actually spend the majority of their time in their cars, and they do not watch videos while driving. But the much better decision here and smarter choice would be just creation of some podcasts, because you can grasp the concept very well by listening to. So just understand the context, understand who your learner is, and why they will just resort to that kind of content, and let that decision drive the modality. Then you should create or select resources. And the main thing here is that you might have some ready-made resources and play around with them. That works too. Just reconsider them, restructure sometimes, and it doesn't make sense to always start from scratch. Then very smart advice I'd love to give you is to promote your content. I have a marketing background, and from the marketing perspective, I understand that if your learners don't know that your content exists, they won't use it. And if they don't remember it, they won't use it. So make it clear that there is some content that might be helpful, and be ready to remind it. Just don't be shy to remind, and be consistent in your communication. That's very important. And last but not least, monitor, modify, evaluate. Actually, the luxury of microlearning is that you can easily adapt something, you can improve something as you go. It's something that is super helpful in our today's fast-paced world. So having this opportunity is really a blast. And frankly, this would work in the ideal world, but we do not just work and live in the ideal world. We live in the real world. And based on my experience, your path highly likely will be looking like this way. So just be ready to face some struggles on your way, to hustles, and that's absolutely normal. Just like with any project, don't think that just calling something micro means that you will invest less resources and less time. If you need to create something really significant and you want to make an impact, then you have to invest. Good news, these steps are very well defined, and probably if you think carefully about it all, you'll have no problems on your way. And taking this opportunity, I'd like to invite all of you to the Microlearning Conference. My company is running on a regular basis. It's a free event. It's free of advertising. We bring together some of the biggest names in the L&D to tell how they enhance their training strategies with microlearning. So they share their case studies. We have live prize giveaway, and we have some digital magic included. So I bet you will enjoy it, and I highly encourage you to book a seat. It's free, microlearningconf.com, and I will be glad to see you all there. And since I'm about to wrap it up, I want to share some inspiration with you. I stumbled upon this nice illustration when I was preparing for this presentation, and I thought that actually this picture can be applied to any field of our lives, but it somehow reminds me that under no circumstances should you underestimate the value of microlearning and that very first small step you could take. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for your comments in the chat. If you have anything to ask me about, I'm open and I'm happy to help.